The kidnapping of Jessyca Mullenberg is a dramatic story that left an indelible mark on her life and that of her family. On September 16, 1995, Jessyca, a 13-year-old girl from Wisconsin, was living an apparently normal life. She was a model student with dreams and aspirations for the future. She loved writing and nurtured a passion for literature. However, that day marked the beginning of a nightmare that would upheave her existence. She was deceived by Stephen Oliver, a neighbor and English teacher who had gained the trust of the family. With the promise of helping her publish her writings, Oliver took Jessyca from her home. But what followed was a nightmare of 105 days that would deeply mark her existence. The day of the kidnapping began like many others for Jessyca. She was a model student, passionate about writing, with a bright future ahead. But that day, Stephen Oliver presented himself as the mentor Jessyca needed. Deceptively, he persuaded her to follow him, taking her away from home, far from her loved ones and a life that seemed perfect. Oliver exploited his position as a teacher to gain the girl's trust, but his true nature soon revealed itself. Once Jessyca realized that Oliver's promises were not what they seemed, it was already too late. She was trapped in a motel in Houston, Texas, and her life was about to be turned upside down. Initially, the reality for Jessyca was traumatic. The first hours of imprisonment were characterized by a combination of confusion and fear. When Oliver told her that she was Cindy Johnson, Jessyca did not understand what was happening. The creation of her new identity was just a step toward Oliver's attempt to destroy her spirit. In the motel room, Jessyca felt completely alone. Her previous life was now a distant memory. Oliver's threats and intimidation became an integral part of her daily existence. Every day, he repeated to her that if she tried to escape, he would kill her parents. This psychological manipulation slowly sank into her mind, causing her to lose hope and leading her to doubt her own reality. Each passing day in captivity felt like an eternity. Jessyca was kept in isolation with no contact with the outside world. Oliver deprived her of everything, including the most basic things like healthy human contact and proper nutrition. During these long weeks, Jessyca sought deep within herself the strength to continue. I was in a spiral of despair. Every day was a struggle to keep a part of me alive, she later recounted, emphasizing the conflict between her will to resist and the growing resignation to her new reality. Oliver imposed strict rules to follow. Whenever she showed signs of rebellion, he reacted with violence, threatening to destroy her life and that of her parents. I had to convince myself that I was no longer Jessyca, but Cindy. It was the only way to endure the pain, explained Jessyca, describing how Oliver tried to erase her identity. As the days passed, Jessyca found herself battling not only against external circumstances, but also the internal struggle against her identity. She felt torn between two worlds, the real one, where she was Jessyca Mullenberg, and the fictional one, where she was forced to live as Cindy. The long nights in the motel passed in oppressive silence. Jessyca reflected on her life, thinking about school, her friends, and her family. Sadness mixed with joy, carrying with it an unbearable weight. Every memory of happy moments, such as reading a good book or laughing with friends, was now a bittersweet reminder of what she had lost. Her mind tried to hold on to these memories, but the terror that Oliver instilled in her every day made it difficult to stay anchored to reality. Oliver did not only separate her from her loved ones, he also used manipulative techniques to maintain control over her. He kept telling her that no one was looking for her and that her parents were forgetting her. He told me I was no longer Jessyca, but that I was Cindy, and that only he knew what was best for me, Jessyca recounted. The psychological manipulation became a powerful weapon. Jessyca began to internalize these statements, feeling increasingly isolated and anxious. The fear of losing her parents' lives and the fear of the consequences of a possible rebellion led her to obey Oliver in a desperate attempt to survive. In a moment of reflection, Jessyca remembered, "Sometimes I wondered if I ever had a real life, or if it was all a dream. The confusion was so total that I started to lose my own identity. The anguish of solidifying her reality became her daily battle. Every morning, Jessyca woke up in the same bed, same fear in her heart. The monotony of captivity, interrupted only by Oliver's work, felt unbearable. During the day, he left her alone in the room while he went to work as a painter at the motel. Jessyca felt that those hours were torture. The loneliness amplified every fear and doubt. Without positive human contact, Jessyca grew increasingly sad and helpless. She tried to occupy her mind with positive thoughts, but Oliver's voice constantly echoed, pushing her into a state of persistent anguish. In those moments, writing and reading, which had once been her passions, became distant lights. During my darkest moments, I thought about what life must be like out there. It seemed impossible that I could ever see it again, Jessyca stated, hinting at the fading hope over time. Each evening spent locked in the room felt like being trapped in a tunnel with no way out. The days of fear culminated in acts of violence. Oliver, to maintain his authority, resorted to threats and at times physical violence. Jessyca was terrified and unable to react. The fear of immediate violent retaliation stifled any impulse to rebel. The psychological pressure exerted by Oliver led her to a state of despair and helplessness. There were moments where his abuses were not just physical, but were also aimed at destroying her self-esteem. Every word he said felt like a direct blow to my heart. He told me I was insignificant and that no one would ever want me, Jessyca recounted later. The situation reached an untenable peak when Jessyca attempted to oppose him. Oliver reacted with indescribable violence, highlighting how his system of control was rooted in constant fear. I was convinced I could die at any moment. One day he grabbed me and said, "If you try to escape, I'll find you and hurt your mother," Jessyca explained. Despite the atrocities, Jessyca continued to seek small ways to resist. These long weeks of captivity, she found comfort in memories and small things. Sometimes she would indulge in thoughts about what life would be like if she managed to escape. I dreamed of one day seeing the sun again and hugging my family. These thoughts kept me alive, she later revealed, expressing the depth of her determination to endure even in the darkest moments. Every small memory became a beacon of hope, focused on insignificant details from her past, such as the sound of her mother's laughter or the colors of her garden. Sometimes, alone in the room, she would try to write in secret, turning her experiences into words on paper. This provided her with an illusion of control, a form of self-expression that allowed her to assert her identity against Oliver's attempts to erase it. Days passed in a repetition of schedules and routines set by Oliver. In the morning, he would leave for work, leaving her alone, a prisoner in a motel. During his absence, Jessyca would try to devise escape plans. But every time she thought of a way to run away, Oliver's threats loomed like a constant shadow in her mind. The terror of discovery by authorities was palpable. Jessyca was aware that an escape could not only mean the risk of being discovered and brought back to Oliver, but also endanger her loved ones. It was like walking on a tightrope. Every wrong move could mean my end, she recounted. Despite this inner battle, there were moments when Jessyca found the courage to address Oliver. I tried to show him that I was a human being, a living entity. But the response I got was always the same. He felt no pity, she specified. Her condition as a prisoner led her to realize that for every word she spoke, every feeling she expressed, there was a brutal and violent response. One of the events that changed the course of her captivity was the moment Jessyca accidentally discovered a television program. Sometimes when Oliver was away, she managed to tune into one of the few stations she could pick up. This became a sort of temporary escape. The moments spent watching television allowed her to lose herself in a world that seemed out of reach. It was during one of her regular evenings checking the small screen that her case was mentioned on America's Most Wanted, a program that focused on missing persons cases. Seeing an image of herself, accompanied by a narration of her circumstances, sparked a glimmer of hope within her. Jessyca hoped that over time someone might recognize her situation. That could be my only chance, she asserted. This thought took hold of her. The awareness that her story resonated out in the world gave her a newfound strength. She began to daydream about being free, holding on to her identity as Jessyca. As days went by and the pressure increased, Jessyca began to wonder if there was somehow a way out. An escape plan began to sprout in mind. She knew she had to find a way to flee and alert someone who could help her. Every day I imagined what it would be like if I could run to a neighbor or one of those people I had seen on TV, she later recounted during her healing journey. However, for every escape thought, the anxiety of Oliver returning home would paralyze her. She had to be ready at all times. Every time he returned to the motel, Jessyca knew she had to play a part. She had to be Cindy and not let any emotion of rebellion or fear show. Her primary goal was to survive. On December 28, 1995, Jessyca Mullenberg spent a day seemingly like many others, imprisoned in the motel where Stephen Oliver kept her confined. However, fate was about to bring her an unexpected change. That morning, as the sun slowly rose, Jessyca could not imagine that it would be the last time she would experience that nightmare. In the days leading up to this moment, Jessyca had witnessed an increase in tension and anxiety. The view of the outside world through the motel window led her to reflect on the hope of possible salvation. But each time, the terror of the unknown held her back. Oliver had returned home from work, and in Jessyca's heart, the idea grew stronger that this day might be different. Throughout the morning, a crucial event was unfolding. Jessyca's case had been picked up by the popular television show America's Most Wanted, which dealt with crimes and missing persons. Thanks to a plea from her family and the sheriff's office, the public was alerted to her disappearance. The visuals presented her photo and briefly recounted her kidnapping story, displaying Jessyca's image and that of her abductor. An employee at the motel, watching the broadcast on TV, recognized Oliver. Her mind raced at the horrifying realization that would lead to a rescue operation. Heart racing, the woman immediately contacted the authorities, providing them with detailed information about Jessyca's location and Oliver. When law enforcement mobilized, they knew time was of the essence. They began planning an intervention to enter the motel, ensuring they would approach the situation cautiously. The gravity of the situation urged them to operate quickly and decisively, while also ensuring Jessyca's safety. Not long after, Oliver returned home. Unaware of what was about to happen, he entered the room and continued his usual behavior. Jessyca, on the other hand, sensed that something different was about to occur. The tension was palpable. Her nervous anticipation peaked when the sound of footsteps approached the door. In an instant, the doors burst open, revealing armed police officers who entered the motel decisively. "Police, we are looking for Jessyca Mullenberg," were their words. Jessyca, dazed and in disbelief, found herself in an unimaginable situation. She had finally been found. As officers called her name, a mix of fear and joy overtook her. With her heart pounding, Jessyca abandoned her refuge from horror and moved towards the door. Recognizing the situation and realizing he had been discovered, Oliver attempted to resist, but the officers immediately stopped him. Finally, justice was at hand. Surrounded by 4 caring officers, Jessyca was taken to a safe location. Her release marked the end of a 105-day nightmare, but not without a chain of emotions that profoundly affected her. Looking into the eyes of the officers, she exclaimed, "Are you really here? Is this all real?" In that moment, Jessyca understood that her life was about to change and that recovery could begin. The news of her release spread quickly, bringing with it a shock of joy and relief among her family and the community. However, her recovery would not be easy. The signs of physical and psychological torture would require years of love and support to rebuild her life. Jessyca Mullenberg had finally returned home, but her true battle was just beginning. With the support of law enforcement and her loved ones, she was about to embark on a long and difficult healing journey. As she stepped into a new life, Jessyca realized that freedom was not only the absence of physical chains, but also the necessity of facing and processing the pain and trauma accumulated during her imprisonment. The news of Jessyca's release quickly reached her family, who waited for her with anxiety and hope. When they were finally reunited, the emotion was overwhelming. Tears of joy and relief mingled with feelings of fear and concern for what Jessyca had endured. Her parents, upon seeing her, felt helpless in the face of the suffering inflicted on their beloved daughter. Her mother, with tear-filled eyes, embraced her tightly as if wanting to protect her from all harm. "You're back, you're safe. We will always love you no matter what happened to you," she gently and firmly repeated. Jessyca felt overmed by the affection and protection, yet she also began to sense the depth of the trauma she had experienced. Her parents' words were meant to reassure her, but the weight of her experience still pressed heavily on her. In the days following her release, Jessyca underwent careful medical and psychological evaluation. Doctors and psychologists worked to understand her physical and mental health state, addressing the consequences of the abuse she had suffered. Jessyca experienced symptoms of post-traumatic stress, difficulty sleeping, recurring nightmares, and fear of being confined again. She participated in therapy and group meetings with other survivors who had experienced similar ordeals. This helped her confront her emotions and begin to process her situation. However, it was a process fraught with obstacles, and the progress was slow. "I felt like I was at the mercy of a stormy sea. Sometimes I was happy to be alive. Other times I just wished to turn back time," she later recounted. As Jessyca embarked on her healing journey, the trial against Stephen Oliver was approaching. Justice had to take its course, and her status as a victim meant she would have to face her captor again. Recognizing Oliver in court was a moment of great emotional burden, but also a necessary step for her personal growth. During the hearings, Jessyca testified with determination, recounting not only what she had endured, but also appealing to a jury to comprehend the horror of her experience. Every word felt like a hammer. "I was there as the invisible scars were revealed. I needed the world to know the truth," she declared. Oliver, while attempting to defend himself, proved unable to justify his actions in the face of overwhelming evidence. Jessyca's testimonies were decisive, leading to his conviction to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. "I wanted justice not only for myself, but for all the victims who cannot speak," Jessyca stated. It was a step towards closing this painful chapter. When the officers called her name, moving through the identification phases, Jessyca felt relieved. It was as if the weight of the world had suddenly been lifted from her shoulders. "I was finally safe," she remembers. Oliver was arrested without resistance, and the threat that had once loomed over her was now facing justice. Although grateful to be free, Jessyca found herself facing the psychological consequences of the trauma she had endured. The transition from captivity to freedom was not simple. It carried invisible scars that would take years to heal. In a post-release interview, Jessyca expressed her confusion. "I was in a bubble. Even though I was physically free, my mind was trapped in that past." After her release, Jessyca was taken to a hospital for medical and psychological assessment. Health professionals worked to ensure her safety, while her family gathered around her, showering her with love and support. This marked a moment of rebirth, but the path to healing would be long and arduous. The trial against Stephen Oliver began in 1996, and Jessyca had to confront her captor in front of the justice system. It was a crucial moment for her, where she had to gather the courage to tell her story. Her testimonies were powerful and moving. "I wanted the world to know what had happened. I wanted other people to realize how important it is to listen to and believe the victims," she asserted. Oliver, for his part, tried to defend himself with a series of confused statements and lies. However, the evidence of his crime and Jessyca's testimonies were overwhelming. His sentence to 40 years in prison without parole represented a form of justice, although Jessyca knew that true restitution for her suffering was a complex concept. Once the chapter of the trial was closed, Jessyca began to build a new life. While carrying the marks of her traumatic experience, she decided not to be defined solely by her story of violence. She graduated with a degree in psychology and actively engaged in raising awareness regarding kidnapping and abuse. Her determination to transform a devastating experience into a fight for others made her a vital voice for change. "I wanted other children to know they weren't alone, that their voices mattered. I had to use my experience to help others avoid what I went through," Jessyca said at various conferences and presentations. Her testimony not only served as a personal account, but also as an educational tool to teach young people how to recognize warning signs of danger. Over time, Jessyca gradually succeeded in getting her life back on the road to personal and professional success. Her story became not just a warning of the dangers that exist in the world, but also a testament to human strength and resilience. She built a family, and while facing the scars of the past, she continued to work towards creating a better future for herself. Today, Jessyca Mullenberg, known as Jessyca Christensen, is a happy mother and a respected professional who dedicates her life to social causes and the pro of children. Through her commitment, she has helped generate awareness about issues of abuse and manipulation, using her voice to educate others on the dynamics of crime and the vulnerability of victims, particularly children. Jessyca has found healing through sharing her story. By participating in events, conferences, and educational programs, she has inspired many to never give up. The sharing of her experience has become an act of liberation, while also helping other victims recognize their own strength. In numerous interviews, Jessyca explained how her inner rebellion was fundamental to her salvation. "One day I realized that even though he tried to take my life away, he couldn't take away my dreams," she said. With these words, she encouraged young people to pursue their passions and not lose sight of who they really are. Despite her incredible resilience, Jessyca has also had to face the weight of post-traumatic stress. Over time, she learned to manage her feelings and sought psychological help to confront her traumas. Therapy has proven to be a crucial component of her journey, allowing her to process her memories and confront her fears. "This is not an easy path," she shares. "There are days when fear and anxiety seem to resurface, but each time I remind myself that I am alive and that I have the chance to build my life." Jessyca has infused determination into this journey, using each day as an opportunity to reinforce her autonomy. Her activism has led her to work with organizations dedicated to the protection of minors and support for crime victims. Through these collaborations, Jessyca has participated in awareness campaigns and used her stories to educate the public about signs to recognize in potential abuse situations. "Every child has the right to be safe and heard," she passionately states. "Our duty is to protect the most vulnerable and ensure their voices are heard." Through her dedication, she has helped provide resources to families and volunteers, equipping them to better understand how to prevent similar situations. Over the years, Jessyca's life has changed drastically. She has formed a family and established a safe, loving environment for her children. She wants her children to grow up aware of their strength and vulnerability so that they can face the world with courage. "I want them to know they can always speak up, that they are heard," she affirmed. Jessyca has devoted time to teaching her children the importance of respect, awareness, and the protection of their boundaries. The story of Jessyca Mullenberg is not just a tale of terror and trauma. It is also a narrative of strength, resilience, and hope. Her journey from a victim of a horrific crime to an activist and devoted mother is a testament that even in the deepest darkness, there is the possibility to rebuild one's life. Through her testimony, Jessyca continues to raise awareness on issues of kidnapping, abuse, and the importance of listening to the voices of victims. Her life is a beacon of hope and a practical example of how personal pain can be transformed into a mission for the good of society. In conclusion, the life of Jessyca Mullenberg represents the power of human resilience. Every day she reminds herself and others that no matter how dark it may become, the light of hope can always resurface.